Good morning, everybody. My name is Leah Dale. I'm a Master Gardener here in Wake County. I've been a Master Gardener since 2012. And Gina asked me if I would do, or I volunteered. She didn't ask me, I volunteered because I enjoy these talks, but I didn't have a topic. So this is kind of a hodgepodge of things that gardeners might be thinking about in the winter. And so I called it Dreaming of Gardening on a cold winter's day, although we haven't had a lot of those. And I like this, this slide here. Anyone who thinks gardening begins in the spring and ends in the fall is missing the best part of the year, because gardening really begins in January when you start to dream about your next year of gardening. So for those of us that live here, we may not remember the definition of winter because we haven't really had one yet, but it's supposed to be the coldest season of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere from December to February. But I think lots of us can think back in the past month, and especially in December, and see that it has been really warm. But it was interesting to find out that our December 2019 only ranks as the 17th warmest December recorded since the late 1800s. So we're used to these waxing and waning temperatures. We had a high of 79 degrees recorded in Laurinburg in December, and then the coldest up in Mount Mitchell. So I think all of us can remember the days that we didn't know if we needed a coat or a sweater, a coat or short sleeves. One thing to think about when you're starting to plan your garden is what is your average last spring freeze, your last frost date. And that date has been shifting so that it's earlier than it has been. But this is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, so this is the latest and greatest information. So our date, we fall between April 1st and April 11th, and that's typically our last hard freeze. And that's when you want to plan your spring plantings around that date. So what do we do if we have all these warm days? Well, best advice is to grab some wine and just kind of chill out about it because you can't change the weather. Typically, if plants have some plants are genetically made so that they have 7 to 10 days of warm weather, they will go ahead and bloom. And there's not anything you can do to halt that, to change it. It's just going to happen. But the good news is most plants can sustain 32 to 35 degree cold weather with up to 35 degrees, down to 32, excuse me, with no problem. But it's when it gets 28 and below that the plants are probably going to freeze. The blooms are probably going to be destroyed, they're going to die off, but that doesn't usually kill the entire plant. So, good news, and you get to drink wine. So today let's talk about some gardening tasks, some plants that have winter interest, how you might want to still support your wildlife in your garden, talk a little bit about some winter vegetables, and things that you can do from your armchair if it does happen to get cold. And I do have my fingers crossed for at least one good snow. So these gardening tasks, when you put your garden to bed, that typically needs to happen in the fall. But if you haven't done it, you can probably still get out there and do some of these things. One really important thing to do is mulching. And I know that a lot of people are going to be starting their spring mulching soon. I like to do it before too many plants are already emerging so that I'm not breaking anything or disturbing plants that are just coming up. But mulching is really important. That's going to keep your plants protected from cold weather and also help keep moisture in the soil. That's one of the reasons that our plants get scorching on the leaves. You see it in the spring, but it's a result of what's happened in the winter. They've gotten really dried out. And if the soil is frozen, they can't take up that water. So the mulching is going to help protect them from weather and keep the moisture in there. Cleaning up your beds is important, but with a little bit of a caveat. Our wildlife depend on some of our offal, I guess you might call it, the things that are left over in your bed. So a lot of our native insects live in our the refuse, all the stuff that's left, your plant material that's left. And a lot of solitary bees actually lay their eggs in the stems of plants. So leave a little bit, at least a corner, maybe in the back of the yard if you don't want it right in the front. And also leaf material, logs, anything like that that you can leave is good for the wildlife. This is a really good time to check your equipment and make sure it's clean and oiled and ready to go, sharpened if you have that kind of stuff, so that you're ready whenever the mood strikes you and it gets warm and you're itching to get out in the yard. We always recommend that you do soil tests. North Carolina actually has free soil testing for homeowners from April to November. So right now it would cost you $4 a box to have your soil analyzed, but you could be ready to do it if you want to wait until the spring and do it in April. It will be free again. The Extension office can give you details on how to do that. If you haven't had it done, we recommend that you do that first and foremost before you start working in your garden. That way you know what kind of amendments you may or may not need. We can also walk you through the process if you're confused at all about this form and what your results when you get them back. We'd be happy to do that. And we recommend that you test your soil every 3 years because it does change. And then last, but the best part is to start planning and have some fun. So your winter landscape doesn't have to be dull and boring. There are things that you can do to add color and interest. So let's talk about some of those. One plant that I think a lot of us are familiar with are the camellias, the Japanese and the Sasanqua Camellias. They bloom typically at different times of the year, and one of the beautiful things about camellias is there is every color and shape out there, and they're just a beautiful specimen to have in your garden. Let me read from my notes so that I don't get confused tell you the wrong thing about each of these. So the Japanese camellias are going to be bigger and have bigger leaves. They can grow really, really tall. I have one in my yard that's basically a tree. And they tend to bloom this time of year. They range from shrubs to small trees. They have dark green, broadleaf, evergreen leaves, and they like moist, acidic, and well-drained, high organic matter soils. And, excuse me, those are the, that must be the Sasanqua, because the next paragraph, no. Japanese camellias is a large plant, I already told you that. Large leaves and flowers, and they bloom from early winter to spring, so now. The Sasanquas have smaller leaves and usually only 6 to 10 feet tall, and they bloom typically September to December, so they're an earlier blooming, or yeah, later if you're talking about right now. And this plant here is at the Pitt County Arboretum. Beautiful, beautiful blooms. One thing you want to be careful with camellias is to rake up the spent blooms that are on the ground, because there is a blight and fungus that can be in those, and you wouldn't want your plant to be affected. Here are some other blooming plants for winter interest. The winter aconite. One word of caution, this is a really poisonous plant, so you need to plant it carefully. And it blooms early spring in February and March. It likes partial to full shade, and it is really pretty in rock gardens. A nice splash of color there. We've got a couple of deciduous hollies that, well, 2 that I'm going to highlight that are natives, but that you can use in the garden. The winterberry here. The nice thing about hollies are they are great for wildlife. A lot of animals eat the berries. Birds, not butterflies, they don't eat berries. Birds, mammals, they'll bring deer in your yard because they will eat them too. But deer are going to come in your yard anyway, so don't think that this is the only thing they're coming for. But they're also a great nectar plant for butterflies and insects, and they're a host plant for some of our natives as well. And just absolutely gorgeous. The hollies do need to have complementary male and female plants in order to pollinate, so you need to be careful about the plants that you buy and put in. This is another one called the possum haw, And again, it has beautiful red berries. I don't know if this picture shows it, but the winterberry has a black dot on it, something that distinguishes it. Possum haw here, again, is great for wildlife and winter interest. Pretty red berries. This is another one. This is going to bring you a range of colors if you have the witch hazel. It goes from yellow to a kind of orange, and it's going to bloom before its leaves come out. So it's really pretty. It'll be this stark kind of silhouette in the garden, and then you'll have these blooms come out. So that's a pretty one. Flowering quince. This is a plant that always makes me think of my mom because she had it in the garden. It's actually in the rose family, so you can see kind of it's got a lot of similarities. And the quince fruit is actually edible after it's cooked, so people use it for making jellies and things. I've never cooked with it, but it also has a really pretty scent to it. So this is a nice one to have in the garden. Flowering quince. Mahonia. This is a plant that deer will not eat, and a friend of mine said they won't eat it because it's too ugly. But he wasn't doing it justice because it does have this pretty fruit and a yellow bloom on it in the winter time. It can grow pretty tall, but can take some pruning. And it's a really pretty plant to have in your yard. And it's just the architecture of it, if nothing else, is really, really nice, I think. This is a stunning plant, a coral bark Japanese maple. And yes, the bark is red like that. It likes sun, so the more sun it has, the redder it's going to be. And that is, again, the architecture, the structure of it is pretty, and then it's going to have beautiful leaves later in the season. You don't have to go with just flowers. I see a thumbs down for the river birch. Why is that?
It's messy.
Is it?
Yeah.
The bark or the leaves or both?
All the little twigs come down constantly.
Okay, all right. So be prepared to clean up, but in return you get this beautiful bark. As its name implies, river birch, it does like a moist soil, so it gets stressed out if it's in a dry area here in our hot summers. So you do want, it wants to be near water, basically. But look at that bark, isn't that outstanding? I don't have a picture here, but crepe myrtles also have some really, really outstanding bark in the wintertime. And my kids love to peel it. So you can also have flowers that smell good. And one of the nice things about wintertime, when you don't have a lot of things blooming, these plants really stand out, either for their color, their texture, their blooms, or their smell. The winter daphne, absolutely gorgeous smell in my opinion. It can be a tricky plant to grow. It's a little bit persnickety, but once you get it established, it's there. It has these beautiful pink and white flowers, and like I said, the scent is just outstanding. If you're not a scent plant person and you want this anyway, don't put it by your front door because you will definitely smell it. The paper bush plant, Edgeworthia, over on the right, that again is one of those plants that has no leaves on it, but you get these blossoms, and really, really pretty. And the winter honeysuckle. Winter honeysuckle likes a lot of sun, so that you would want to plant where it's going to get full sun. And wintertime, I mean, again, I know we haven't had snow, hopefully we will, but snow, when it snows, it's a good time to kind of assess your landscape and see what kind of shapes and what kind of structures you have, and it's a good time to plan to add things if you want to or need to. So here we've got both hardscapes and plants that are going to just draw your eye to them, and you can also look at the landscape and ask yourself, what is missing? What do I need to add? Where do I need height? Where do I need more mass? Now some things are missing, obviously, because they haven't come up yet, but it's a good kind of, these are kind of your structure plants that you can see in the winter. So let's talk a little bit about wildlife. And this poor little cardinal, that's his bird feeder. It looks like a mailbox, but that's his bird feeder with a lot of snow on it, and he's wondering why nobody is feeding him. And I had one this morning that was all over my back deck, a male cardinal. Something that you can grow in winter, because we have such mild winters, there are a lot of vegetables that you can keep growing throughout the winter. We have plants that are considered cold hardy, like collards and kale, turnip greens, spinach, and Swiss chard. And some of these may even live through the winter without any help from you, and then kind of revive themselves in the spring and have another flush of growth and good stuff for you to eat. So here's some, the chard on the right, I enjoyed growing that just for the look. It comes in lots of different colors, and this one has got the green leaves and the red veins, but it comes in a multitude of colors. So that can be a specimen interest plant popped in among your other beds, not just in a vegetable bed. But you can also help to protect your winter crops. One way to do that is to have row covers, so they actually don't sit on top of the plants. This is a special material that you buy, and you buy it by the weight, and the weight tells you how thick it's going to be, but it's also made so that sunlight can get through. But you're putting it on some kind of cover holder. So these are hoops that you can buy. Another cheap, easy way to do it is to use the signs that go with political signs. You see those, you grabbed them in November. Then you can use those without the sign on it, but just use the wire part and drape the row cover on it. And it keeps things pretty warm in there, pretty warm and toasty. Another way to do it is cold frames. And this is a really nice one here from Buncombe County at the bottom. But what it is, it's a wooden box, but it has a hinged glass top, and that's the key to this, because with a cold frame, that glass is going to act as it's going to use the sunlight to heat that box, and it can actually get way too warm. So you need to hinge it, and there's a way to do it, and I encourage you to look online, look at publications that state has about how to do that and how to gauge the temperature so that you don't fry your plants on the inside. You can buy them or you can make your own. I've seen some cool ones use a door that has glass panes in it, and that would be your hinged top. I'm not a builder, so I have not built one, but I've seen evidence of it. And then the technical name for a cover like this is a cloche. They used to be glass, and I'm sure you probably still buy them, but look at this, you can make your own. And if you'll notice, those are plastic bottles. They have the tops off of them, and the ones that are turned upside down have holes in the top, because again, things can get really warm in there. The radiation of the sun, or the heat of the sun is going to heat those up pretty quickly. But a way to protect new plants. So in a couple of weeks, it's going to be time to be thinking about planting seeds for transplants if you want to do that. So you need to read your seed packets to find out how long it takes for them to germinate and how long before they're big enough to plant. And also look at planting charts from the Extension Service to tell you when you can put them out. Again, our last freeze date is going to be right there in early April. But you start with an insect, weed, and disease-free growing medium, and make sure they have heat and moisture. You want to give them enough light, and indoor lighting is not good enough. There needs to be the proper lighting to grow a sake plant. What you're trying to do is make these plants grow up to be as healthy as possible. And they need to be able to sustain wind and rain and everything else outside. If you're growing them inside, starting them out, then you need to carefully work on them to get them hardened to be outside. So that means taking them out for a couple of hours to start with, bringing them back in. So it takes some dedication, because you can't forget them, they might freeze overnight. And not all plants are easily transplanted, but some that do well are broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, okra, tomatoes, and eggplants. So it's a really economical way to start plants. But you do need to put some work into it. It's not as easy as going and buying them at a gardening store. So let's talk about armchair gardening. That could be wine in that cup, that could be, who knows, but you're sitting there, it's too cold to be outside. What are you gonna do? So one of the obvious things would be to start looking at some catalogs, and some that are kind of local to us and have stuff that we can easily plant in our gardens are Wayside, Park Seed, and Wayside and Park Seed are actually owned by the same company. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and Bluestone Perennials. And I'm sure there are more out there, but these are some that popped up and that I have a little bit of experience with. And you can go online and see a lot of stuff, but most of the companies you can request a catalog if you like sitting in a chair and actually flipping through. And if you're like me, you're going to look through and have all sorts of amazing dreams, and I would suggest leaving it for a day or two and coming back to it and then doing your order, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of stuff that you may not have the time or the energy to either plant or take care of. I speak from experience. There are all sorts of gardening publications, and this is a great time of year to be reading through some of these. The first and foremost is to look through the Extension Services publications. There is a little bit of everything online. And so if you Google Extension Gardening publications, you're going to get to this link, and there is pages of things for you to look through. The nice thing about, or the thing that we actually want you to remember about extension publications or anything from NC State is this is all research-based information, and it's specific to our area. So you're going to get stuff that is true. You can find a lot of stuff on the internet, and contrary to some belief, everything on the internet is not always true. So we want you to use trusted information. So stuff from the Extension Service. You could also Google, if you get stuff from some of our sister land-grant universities, Clemson, Virginia Tech, those are the two that are coming to mind right now. But something from around here, again, research-based institutions, then that, again, is trusted information. You can also sit with some magazines, and here's some that tend to have really good information. Triangle Gardener. That one is a free publication that you can find in gardening centers, libraries, all around town. And that has information, again, that's specific here. And that's another way to dream, is to go to flower shows. The home show was just this weekend in Raleigh. But all these events are going to be publicized in the Triangle Gardener magazine. And our own Gina Myers often writes for that, so you want to read her stuff, of course.
And other master gardeners.
And other master gardeners, exactly. Fine gardening, horticulture, and birds and blooms. Again, you need to look at information that's specific to North Carolina and hopefully to our area, because the climate is different across the state. So these last magazines aren't necessarily going to speak to that. But you could get inspired, and you might find information that you then want to check against information from NC State or Extension. So again, more online resources. We have lots of gardening resources through the Extension Service. There's a company called Lee Valley Supplies that has all sorts of stuff, but they have some really unique gardening implements. So I didn't even know there were things to do some of the things that they sell. So if you want to kind of go down a rabbit hole on their website, that was a fun one to play around with. Southern Living now endorses some plants, I guess, with their living plant collection. They don't actually sell them, but they have links to merchants that would sell them. But these are plants that have done well in the South, so that's a good place to look. And then we have a gardening health publication that probably all of us could use at one time or another. We also have something that tells you the bloom times for plants. So as you're planting and want to have blooms throughout the year, this is a really handy one. Chatham County has information about native perennials, and also on native trees and shrubs. Natives are an awesome way to go because they're already adapted to our climate, because our wet, dry periods that we have, and then these temperature ups and downs. So natives are already adapted to our crazy ways of weather here. The nice thing about the Chatham County stuff is there's a lot of pictures as well. I also encourage you to look at the Arboretum's website because they have tons and tons of pictures. And for me, I need to look and see the plant. I think most of us probably do, to see if that's the kind of plant that I want. And they also are broken down by the times of year that they're blooming or have interest. And that's a good thing to know when you're planning your garden. We also have a beginning vegetable guide, so that can give you information on how to do it, basically, from beginning to end, and a planting calendar. And again, those dates are really important to know, especially the last freeze date, but then you know, different plants go in at different times of the year, so you want to check that to have as much success as possible. And this book, the Extension Gardener Handbook, this is a Master Gardener publication, and it is our textbook now for Extension Master Gardeners throughout the state. It's an absolutely beautiful book, stock full of more information than you could ever use. You can actually buy it. There's a hardback version that you can buy. There's also an ebook if you'd rather have it online to read, or have it as a Kindle book, or whatever platform you use. Or you can use it for free online. And so you may have noticed a lot of the pictures here came from the Extension Gardener Handbook. So I can't say enough good things about this publication. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of research, but it's got great information in it. And another really neat thing that we have is this plant database. So this is just a screenshot of the page, but you'll see kind of towards the bottom middle, you search, it'll search by common name, it'll search by botanical name, and then it pulls up a page with several pictures, not just one, so that you can take a look at the plant. It gives you kind of a synopsis of the plant, and then if you scroll down, it's got all the factual information that you might want, or maybe not. But there's all sorts of information, and so that's the database that I went to when I was looking for plants for this presentation. It's just a wealth of information. So you do need to know, my experience has been you need to know the plant that you're looking for in order to find it, but lots and lots of information. And then you've got more links to other information on this website as well. And then you've always got your Master Gardeners. We are in the office Monday through Friday, and also available by email and by phone. So I encourage you, questions small or large, call us and ask, because sometimes we're sitting there with nobody calling, and we'd love to hear from you. And because what we want to do is to help you be successful in your gardening endeavors, and just tons and tons of experience and knowledge. And we know how to research it so that if we don't know the answer to the question, we're able to find it. And again, research-based information so that you're not using anecdotal stuff or stuff that maybe your neighbor told you, or you think you heard, or you saw on the internet and you're not sure about. Call us and we'll verify it for you. Okay? So that's what I've got. Has anybody got questions that I may or may not be able to answer? The first thing they teach us in Master Gardening class is to say, I don't know, but I'll be glad to check on that and get back with you. Yes?
I've never tried growing the winter aconite. Have you grown it, or has anyone else grown it here? Does that really do well here? And like, if so, where? Like
Okay.
what little?
I have not grown it, so does anybody else?
I have it growing, it's already up, it was in shade, that tree died, now it's in sun, and it's spreading. So it's been up about a week or so.
Okay, good.
What's the plant?
Winter aconite,
What's the what?
aconite, the little yellow
Okay.
that it showed you.
Right, got it.
Do you know if the deer eat it, or rabbits?
I don't think so, but I don't have deer up near my house,
I
so,
think it said it was highly poisonous.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
they
do.
probably know that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to mention, if you like vegetable gardening,
The Master Gardeners are hosting vegetable gardening workshops in February and March at each of the 7 regional libraries.
Yes.
So if you go to the library websites, it will have it on. They're called Ready Garden Grow. It's a 2.5-hour workshop to kind of get you up on the basics of vegetable gardening.
Well, thank you all for coming out. And
Thank you.
maybe you'll be inspired to look at a catalog or go out in the garden today.
Thank you, Leah.